Welcome to Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405. Now, among the many things that Ace Magashule said on Friday was that history will absolve him. I wonder if the same can be said about the ANC, given how they've handled this matter.
I think it is very clear that the ANC has failed dismally in handling this matter. They have been silenced. They have been struggling to take a decision around people or implementing a resolution that they've taken within their conference. So I think history will definitely not absolve them. I think also with Mr. Magashule, he should be taking a high moral ground and stepping aside and fixing his own problems before he can resume, as he is leading one of the most influential organizations in the country and in Africa as well.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned him taking a high moral ground, because in some respects this does become a morality issue, doesn't it? But would you agree what conflates the issues here is that no one appears to be clean, and so who actually can tell the other what to do when it comes to things like ethics and morals within the ANC?
I think when you are in leadership of a political organization as big as the ANC and you are a leader in society, then we need people that are going to stand out and say, we are not going to tarnish the name of the organization, we are not going to tarnish the name of the society, and we will rather step aside and deal with our conflicts. So in the ANC, there has been challenges with people refusing to step aside or people refusing to take responsibility, and that was seeing it continuing with Mr. Magashule's case.
Andile Lungisa, who has his own cloud of controversy hanging over his head, also speaking out on that day. What he mentions is interesting, though. His reading of the step-aside resolution is that it's in conflict with the constitution of this country insofar as the notion of innocent until proven guilty is concerned. Many might say perhaps he has a point. Does that then mean that the ANC has gotten itself into a rut by even taking on this resolution to begin with?
I think from a legal perspective, they are really correct that the ANC constitutions cannot supersede the constitution of the republic. So the rights that are entrenched, individual rights that are entrenched in the constitution cannot be compromised because of what the ANC constitution says. But in my view, it should go beyond just the legal interpretation, but it should go more on what is the right thing to do. And the right thing to do morally is to step aside and clear your name. So irrespective of the law, it must be an individual as prerogative to step aside and say, I am going to clear my name, and not look at the law and hide with the law, as we are seeing happening now.
Much easier said than done, right? But from a governance perspective, we often hear that leadership is what is needed. Many people wax lyrical about that. If that's the context, what ought to be the response from a Cyril Ramaphosa?
I think the defining silence from President Ramaphosa has been worrying. In times of crisis and in times of challenges, and we're definitely in times of crisis, if the ruling party cannot hold together, then we're in crisis. Mr. Ramaphosa is expected as the president of the ruling party and the president of the country to give a lead, to be decisive around what should happen. And he has failed dismally in that sense to be really decisive. He is playing to the gallery. He says one thing in a press media, and we hear another thing as part of the resolutions of a meeting of the ANC. So we don't know what are really the resolution, and it's not very clear as to what would be the next step. One says within a month we are going to go back and finalize the issue of people stepping aside. Mr. Magashule says it must still go to the branches, which it might take longer than a month. So Mr. Ramaphosa has failed to give leadership in that sense.
What is interesting is reports from the Sunday World this morning, actually. They're essentially painting a picture of many of Zuma's supporters being willing to give an armed response to the former president's arrest. It does, again, give credence to the idea that perhaps the stakes are higher than many are willing to admit. If this does end up in a situation where there's unrest in whatever form or shape, who do you think ought to step into the breach then to manage the situation at the very least, given the fact that Ramaphosa as a leader is very much actually involved in the turmoil himself?
I think we must very clearly come strongly around this issue. The law must take its course. If there are people that have transgressed the law must take its course. We must never allow anarchy. People who are saying they are going to defend certain people take the law into their own hand. So law enforcement agencies must take a very strong stand around such people. And we must not set a precedent where we say certain laws apply to certain people, or not all people in the country are equal in terms of the law. So certainly Mr. Ramaphosa and the law enforcement agencies within government must take a firm stand around anybody who is accused of any wrongdoing, irrespective of the position that they hold or the position that they have held before within government or any other sphere of government or entity of government. So that must be very clear. The stake might be high, but that must be clear. The law must apply to everybody equally.
I wonder what your thoughts are around the idea that the case has been postponed now to August. I mean, a lot of the sentiment shared in the public domain is one centered around a sense of disillusionment. You know, more and more people are feeling that this is unlikely to yield any results, whatever they are. Do you think it works for or against the ANC to have this case gone for so long?
I think for ANC, unfortunately, it would create further instability, the fact that the case goes longer. And I think it is Mr. Magashule's strategy to prolong this case so that he can gather more support, so that he can see how he can then destabilize the ANC and ensure that they delay in taking this decision. So for ANC, delaying the court case has actually, unfortunately, bad ramifications. And for Mr. Magashule, it will keep him in that position for longer, which is unfortunate. You will remember that this postponement or this new date that was set was because some of the lawyers of Mr. Magashule and his co-accused are not available until that time. And that's unfortunate because that plays into their strategy to stay longer and destabilize or try and strategize and create their own fight back.
Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate your insights on Newzroom Afrika this morning. The Prof is from the Stellenbosch University School of Public Leadership. Thanks very much indeed.